Welcome to episode 8 of Wrestling Tonight. That's right, 8 like a snowman, ARIEL HELWANI. I am the Ace of the Tavern, live from the No Sale Studios, Acefield Retro, and joined, as always, Monday night here with the one bad Chad. What's up, dude?
Not much, man. I'm excited. We've got a couple big events that happened. We're going to break down the results of all of that, and we got some fun news to discuss. So, wrestling tonight. I've got coffee. I'm jacking myself up. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, and the crazy part is the story's going to look a lot different with the ending of Elimination Chamber. We're going to be going in depth about all the results, but more specifically, the missed opportunity that was maybe potentially a memorable moment. But of course, we're not going to bury the lead here. Let's get into the first story we have on the docket here with our big three.
Let's get into the big three.
Our first story here in the big three, all elite wrestling, potentially without the elite. So this has been a conversation that's always been popping up in the news. We talked about the potential of it happening. Of course, the possibility always goes back to, well, Cody left, and now it seems like there's a possibility that others will be following. So according to WrestlingNews.co, Kenny Omega is the much bigger name than Jay White, who WWE is interested in signing. So Chad, if you remember earlier in the week, WWE reports were coming out that Jay White wasn't going to be pursued because they have another guy on the line. I think we sent in the group chat and said, who could it possibly be? Who's a bigger star than Jay White? Well, looking at it now, Kenny Omega is a bigger star than Jay White.
Yeah, I mean, at first, I got to be honest, when that report first came out, and WrestlingNews.co, I get a little shaky. What's the legitimacy of this place? But, it is a report, so we want to report on it. But I thought it was FTR at first because I didn't realize that Kenny's contract was so close to being up. But as soon as that report came out, I was like, oh, no brainer, man. If you got Jay White and Kenny Omega, I love Jay White. We talked about him in the big three last week, but Kenny Omega, it's definitely the bigger star.
Yeah, and Fightful Select, more of a reputable source than WrestlingNews.co, mentioned that Kenny is on good terms with WWE, and there are several people within WWE who believe signing him is possible. As you mentioned before, Kenny Omega's contract was rumored to be expiring around this time. And the thing is with wrestling contracts, I think there should be a hub. Like with baseball contracts, you can go to MLB Trade Rumors or Baseball Reference. You can look at the years and the dates. These should be more public information so we can at least be like, build up the anticipation for free agency, because it's like, the FTR was supposed to be a free agent, and then we found out they were going to be in April instead of January. So what is the truth of Kenny's contract? Only, I guess, Kenny and AEW know.
Yeah, and I think Fightful keeps a running tally of when contracts are supposedly up. But like you said, no one knows for sure because, they could tack on time for injury. Like, we don't know all of the kind of little clauses that are built into these contracts, but here's the thing. You said Fightful mentioned that Kenny is on good terms with WWE and they believe it's a possibility to sign him. I remember when he was leaving New Japan and he hadn't yet signed with AEW, but AEW had been announced. I remember when that was the story then, that they thought they were going to get him then, and there was a little bit of scuttlebutt about, oh, is he going to WWE or is he going to follow the Bucks to AEW? But I do think some of this is just kind of fodder for the news sites. There is an aspect of that. Like, I feel like anytime a big free agent like this comes up, it's constantly, especially now with AEW in the picture, it's constantly this AEW, WWE, where are they going to go? We've got that right now with FTR. We've got it with the Bucks. We've got it with Kenny. What do you think, Ace? I mean, do you think there's a possibility that this guy could go to WWE? I mean, what's your gut telling you?
Well, if we're looking at the path that Cody Rhodes is trailblazing, I'd say we have to consider the possibility. I think if you would have said this before Cody did it, we'd be like, absolutely not. He's the heart and soul of what is AEW, one of the guys at least. But now looking at it, the perception and the personality of AEW is shifting over time. And I think Tony Khan, as we mentioned over and over again here on Turnbuckle Tavern, follow us at Turnbuckle Tavern on all your platforms, there's a divide in ideology. And I think it really stems around the Punk situation where Tony Khan, and who knows what's going on behind the scenes, but dude, imagine he's trying to do business with CM Punk. And if that is the core of the issue, maybe Kenny Omega says, I'm out. I don't want to be a part of this because this is not the AEW I created with my friends. And that's okay. Maybe that's good for AEW and good for Kenny Omega. So yeah, I give it a percentage chance, probably 15 to 20%, but that's bigger than I would have said about a year ago.
I'm totally with you on that. I think prior to Cody Rhodes, I would be like, there's no way in hell. But if you would have asked me about Cody leaving, I would have said there's no shot in hell prior to that. And then when he did, and like you said, the way they've handled him, the way they've booked him based off of the gimmick that he essentially brought to a national stage on All Elite Wrestling television, I think you have to think it is a possibility. I think this is a big moment, though. I want to touch on what you said about Punk playing a part in these contracts coming up, because I think that's a big thing. But first, the thing that really gets me with like Kenny Omega, the Bucks, these bigger names coming up for contract, this is a moment for Tony Khan where he has to prove that he is a legit option for pro wrestlers. And what I mean by that is he can't just have all of his big guys leaving. And I know he re-signed Chris Jericho. I know he re-signed John Moxley. Moxley's like, I'm not going to let this company die. I'm in it for the long haul. I love that about Mox. Mox just re-signed prior to, there was none of this internet, like, will he, won't he? He
Right.
killed that before it ever started. And that's what I love about John Moxley. But for Tony Khan, it's like, dude, you had Cody leave. You let him leave. Whatever went on behind the scenes with that, we don't know. I don't know if we'll ever know. Maybe if a book's written 20 years from now, we'll hear about what really went down. But dude, if he lets Cody go and he lets Kenny go and he lets the Bucks go, or any combination of Bucks and Omega leave, that to me is a big hit on the optics of AEW. Like that would be the equivalent of Triple H or Vince McMahon or whoever's in charge over there, Nick Khan. That would be the equivalent of them letting a Seth Rollins go, of them letting a Roman Reigns go. They're not going to allow that to happen. They're going to break the bank. I think MJF even falls into that. Like if he would let MJF go, you have cornerstones that you have to build your company on, especially when you're a young company. Like these are pillars of this company that we're used to. And if you let them go, it gives me hesitation as a fan to be like, I can trust this guy to build a history, because let's be honest, we're building a history here. We're watching a company build their foundational history. And when Tony let Cody go, that's what was hard for me. It wasn't the fact that Cody left. You know, wrestlers leave, wrestlers jump back and forth, but for a young company establishing history, it was so odd. It almost like it's this dividing line in their history now, where it's like you had the early days with Cody, and now we're in this era without your flag bearer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think a big piece to this as well is looking at it in sports terms. You don't want to be looked at as a rebuilding franchise that guys just like hone their craft and then go off to a different team. They've always been trying to get the eye of WWE. And I don't think that's what Kenny's been doing. Kenny is obviously a huge star prior to this, but that's the notion you're trying to break free from. You want to be the exact same on the other side, parallel opposite, where it's just a choice of the bigger company to go to. And they can compare the money, they can do all of that, but if Kenny leaves, it's a perception thing, but it's also, you can look at silver lining. And that's what I try to do always, and look at maybe it's Tony Khan saying, I don't need these guys anymore. I want to tell the story with different guys. I am confident in my ability to build stars. So maybe he's looking at it that way, where Kenny Omega, maybe he's being difficult to work with, or obviously they're not putting emphasis on Omega and the Bucks right now. They're the trios champs, but hasn't been a lot of story. We saw a hint of the House of Black story, but they're buried on the undercard. And it's strange to say, because Kenny lost that title to Hangman, got hurt, went away for many months, came back it looks better than ever after the injury, and he's not a focal point of the storytelling. And all I have to do is ask the question, why? Why is that the case?
Yeah, I think a little bit of that is just the way they handle their stories. Like and we have to break free of the way WWE tells their stories versus there are other ways you can do it. But
Right.
having said that, there is just pro wrestling 101 how you do things. And I'm with you. It's kind of odd that Kenny lost that title and there's been no mention of, hey, I'm the man. You know, we saw it when he went to Wrestle Kingdom against Will Ospreay. The feeling and vibe that guy has in New Japan versus AEW right now, it's night and day. I mean, he felt like the end boss. He
Yeah,
felt like,
final boss in a video games Bowser
yeah,
at
man.
the end of
He felt
Mario.
like the man when he came out. And I mean, I thought just as far as presentation alone, when he came out, I'm like, dude, this guy feels as big as Roman Reigns in New Japan. And now, you know, he's in that trios division, and I get they're trying to build a division, and those guys are buddies. They want to work together. And I do think the House of Black situation that's kind of bubbling up before Revolution is a step in the right direction. But it does leave me wondering, like you said, maybe Tony doesn't wants to work with other people and not have to constantly give story to those guys. But I don't think that's the case. I think he knows it's all elite wrestling. These guys brought such a fan base with them here. If they leave, you're going to be hurting, regardless of how you book them. There are people that attach themselves to this brand because they followed being the elite. They followed these guys in ROH, New Japan. And I feel like if you let them go, you know, I know he considers themselves an option, a challenger brand to WWE. You're not going to beat WWE and become this major company in the here and now. But man, you, like you said, it's a perception thing. If he lets stars of this caliber leave, it makes it seem like AEW is just a stopping point to get to the true big show. And I don't think you want that perception out there.
Yeah, agreed. And I think there's a big piece to it as well. There hasn't been anyone on the other side coming over that isn't sort of excess. Like we look at the guys that come over and we love them, but if you look at it from WWE side, they let them go. There's no one that went to be like, all right, we want them so badly. Like I'm not saying John Cena would be a fit or Brock Lesnar or like Taker, lifer guys that are just like, these are the heart and soul of WWE and bringing them over for a one-off. I guess you could say Bret Hart came to present the championship, but that was like whatever. Bret Hart shows up on every.
He's
indie.
a legend, though. It's different.
He's a legend. So I think the biggest piece to pull, like for Kenny Omega's equivalent to AEW, you need to pull someone like a Roman. Like that would it have to be. That's how important Kenny is to what all elite wrestling is. And I guess if you're shifting, like we were talking about before, what the identity is, maybe Tony has all these people in his ear, like this insecurity of booking your friends as champion. It's all friends wrestling. And for better or for worse, maybe that's getting into him because we do know he pays attention to social media and the reports and the dirt sheets. So maybe that's getting to him and saying, you know what, I feel like I can't even book these guys fairly because I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't. I put the titles on them, then it's just because it's all elite wrestling. And if I don't, I'm not using them correctly. So maybe he's like, you know what? Let me just deal with Top Flight. Let me just deal with the guys I have on my roster because it's easier.
Don't do it, Tony. I love Top Flight, but they are not replacing the Bucks, man. I think he knows that. Like, you need the Bucks to help Top Flight get to that moment.
100%.
You know, like you can't. And I think it's all conjecture from us, like trying to get in the head of Tony. Maybe he feels like this, maybe he feels like that. I think at the root of it, it's fans maybe building something bigger than what it truly is. I'll honestly be shocked if he lets Kenny Omega go, because not only is he's one of your top stars in your company, but he's also a major thread that you have with this New Japan business. You know, like their whole partnership. What happens with their partnership with New Japan if Kenny goes? You know, that's their big. He's the New Japan US champion. He came out on Rampage wearing the Trios title and the IWGP United States title. I thought that was very interesting that he wore that title to the ring.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. And we mentioned the Bucks as well. So we are talking about the elite. So the Bucks are part of this as well. And they're in a completely separate category. But Sean Ross Sapp was reporting under a paywall, obviously on Fightful, that they are in discussions to sign new contracts. This has been a discussion on and on with AEW, but they have not done that, which leads people to look a little bit closer at their Twitter bios, which is a little revealing into their way of thinking. And right now, it was all a dream in quotes on their Twitter bio, which makes people think maybe at the end of this year they're going to be leaving AEW. Maybe they looking to go elsewhere. Maybe they want to work indie dates, or maybe just maybe they want to go to WWE. So, but if you look deeper into the quote, the Young Bucks' latest Twitter bio, being the Elite called It Was All a Dream, that aired in July 2016. The episode featured Matt Jackson having a nightmare about working as an extra for WWE, which he did for 2 SmackDown tapings back in 2008. And this is an inside reference that, the Young Bucks always like to do this. And they know what they're doing, whether it's truthful or not. They're getting people to talk on the internet. But man, if it's raising some alarms in a way that, like I said, Cody has paved the path. They could step on that road and get there themselves, because Cody was taking as a bushwhacking knife, just walking through and paving it. No one's ever done it. These guys could as well.
No, you're very right. And like with the Bucks, they love those subtle references that they put out on Being the Elite, that they put out on their Twitter bio, but that's on one hand. On the other hand, they love putting that bait out there to completely troll the fans. So it's like, are they trolling us? Are they giving us breadcrumbs for what is to come? That's the beauty of the Bucks on social media and on Being the Elite. They play with our hearts, but as it stands right now, I can't see the Bucks and Kenny leaving. I think they're too entrenched, even more so than Cody was in the company. Cody wasn't an integral part in that New Japan partnership. The Bucks, not only is it Nick and Matt, but Matt's wife Dana plays a large part behind the scenes, or at least she did in the early beginning. Like, she was an integral part of All Elite Wrestling in the beginning. Like, she did a lot of work for the company. I'll be shocked. I think FTR goes back to WWE before the Bucks go to WWE. We've said it a lot, man. Regardless of what you think about the Young Bucks, even more so than Kenny, regardless what you think about the Young Bucks, they are really the heart and soul of this company. As far as like, when I think of the vibe, when I think of kind of the credo of All Elite Wrestling, it all came from the Bucks.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing to look at right now is just time and what is going to be happening over time for the Young Bucks and how they're booked for the future. And I guess one of the other silver lines I want to mention before we move on to topic number 2 is just the fact that we're talking about this and not pairing it with, in conjunction of saying AEW is dead in the water. Like, the thing is, if these guys jump ship, AEW will be just fine. And that's enough of a legacy they're leaving behind with AEW that they'll survive. AEW will live as a brand. They're going to get a huge TV deal, even with the Elite or without them. I guess that's the beautiful thing about what was built here. And that's what Cody was saying on these interviews he's been doing. And I'm sure there's going to come a time where AEW is going to have to exist without them. I think people didn't think it would be this soon, but maybe they're going to be challenged to be like, you know what, let's build a new image of what it is. It's still called All Elite Wrestling, but maybe we're going to go in a different direction and have a different personification. Because if Tony wants to do business with Punk and he thinks a lot of money can be made, and we see TV ratings support that, and these guys are unwilling to do that, maybe Tony puts his personal feelings aside and say, this is what is right for my company. If you guys are not on board with it, go pursue elsewhere. Maybe come back like we hope Cody does in 5 years, 4 years, something like that.
No, I'm with you there. I do think they have AEW will survive without these guys, but it will drop their perception down. Like, if they lose, regardless of who fills in, if Punk comes back and they leave, like, I still think it hurts the company in a way of perception. Like, it drops them down. But I think if this were to happen and these guys were to leave, I think the only thing Tony can do to reestablish maybe the perception that they are a true player in getting free agents, they would have to sign a legit free agent from WWE. I'm talking like the only way to gain back that respect is, you let Omega and the Bucks go, you've got to pick up a Seth Rollins.
Charlotte, Bianca Belair, something like huge, like a big moneymaker for them.
A big current day in their prime star. It can't be some mid-carder who we feel isn't being utilized in WWE.
Yes.
It can't be someone who's released by WWE. It has to be someone who they win in the contract game. But someone's on the table to be signed, and they get someone who WWE also wants. Where a wrestler in a big position of power chooses AEW over WWE, because right now it feels like you're just picking up the scraps that WWE doesn't want. And I'm not discrediting the talent. I mean, a lot of the talent they've picked up, the Malachi Blacks, the Miros, these are all people we love, but they were picked up, like you said earlier, because they were released. You have to win a contract battle to regain your respect if you lose these guys. And before we move on to 2, I just want to touch on the Punk situation. How are we being played here? Because there's a lot of we wonder, is the contracts, this isn't just the Bucks and Omega. There's also FTR involved. And I feel like Punk is the elephant in the room. Are all of these contracts, FTR's contracts coming up in the spring, Omega's contracts coming up, Bucks contracts coming up, and there's a lot of they're waiting to see how this Punk thing plays out. If Punk resigns, FTR wants to resign. If Punk resigns, the Bucks and Omega doesn't want to resign. We really don't know the behind the scenes story here, but do you think Punk is playing a part in these wrestlers deciding where they sign in the future?
Yeah, I think so. I think these guys specifically, because if the situation's not fixed, if they didn't get in a room together and have a conversation, again, we don't know if they did or didn't. But I think if the bad feelings still exist, how could you want to work with a guy that acted that way and didn't apologize for it? So yeah, I'd imagine. And if Tony has to pick between the two sides, that's fucking challenging, man. He's put in a position that is right now unwinnable, because there's going to be angry people on either side. There's going to be people in the locker room that a lot of them, listen, they came to AEW because the Bucks and Omega were there. But a lot of them probably look at CM Punk as that transcendent huge star that AEW has been lacking since he left. And you can't deny the numbers that they were pulling with him there. Merchandise, TV ratings, all the stuff with CM Punk, that speaks for itself. I mean, the guy's caustic. He's unreasonable at times, but you can't deny the value is there and the money to be made. And now if you're looking at all the pieces that WWE could be acquiring, they're just a CM Punk away from doing their own 3-on-3 trios warfare at WrestleMania for the next year, like FTR and Punk versus the Bucks and Omega, and using a story elsewhere. Not that they would, but that's a scary situation that at least Tony has to look at and be like, hey, wait a minute. This wasn't on the table for me. What are you guys doing over there?
Could you imagine if Tony Khan can't pull the trigger, can't get these guys in the room to do business, and all of them leave and go to WWE and do that story?
And that would just let's pull from reality. It happened elsewhere.
Yeah, man. That would be a major blow to the credibility of Tony Khan's booking. If you can't make that, and then Paul Levesque goes and books it. I think you're right. He definitely is playing a part in it. I just wonder what the backstage thing is. I wonder if they get in a room. I think they all know that, man, this story could do business. It's just a matter of, do they want to do that business? And I'll be honest, I think if I'm booking right now, if I'm Tony Khan, you got this House of Black elite thing, I would run that all the way to Double or Nothing, regardless of what happens at Revolution. I would play that long. And then once that wraps up, Punk FTR, build towards an all-out match in Chicago between those two. If he plays his cards right and signs these guys, and these guys can get in a room and come to an agreement on things, he literally could have some of the best storytelling in 2023 with the House of Black angle with the Elite, bringing back FTR and Punk as super heels going against these guys in Chicago. This could be great storytelling, especially for that trios title. I mean, you've just booked your year out.
Yeah.
If you sign these guys, you have something on the table if everyone's willing to do business. It's exciting to think about, but I just wonder if it'll happen.
Yeah, only time will tell, but Tony Khan stays in the news for story number 2 if you want to get into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
So if you guys saw this yesterday, Tony Khan, well, Friday night it started really because ARIEL HELWANI appeared on the Elimination Chamber Go Home Show edition of SmackDown on Fox. And there was 2 crowd segments where ARIEL HELWANI was in the crowd. He's from Montreal, so he's hyping up the match where Sami Zayn's getting a shot at Roman Reigns. And what really rubbed Tony the wrong way is Michael Cole introduced ARIEL HELWANI as a quote-unquote combat sports journalist. So Tony Khan went to Twitter, as we all do when we're angry, and said, and I quote, I think we have the tweet here, "You're a fraud, ARIEL HELWANI. You're as legitimate as a reporter as Tony Schiavone." So ARIEL no-sold this for a bit. All night, he was tweeting about the UFC event. He was talking about the atmosphere in the Bell Center, everything but responding to HELWANI. And then eventually he did respond to him where, he went out there and he said, "Thanks for watching, old friend. Can't wait for our next chat." And then he said, this is the biggest probably insult I did on the intro here, but also don't listen to the Snowman, Schiavone. You're a legend in my book. And Tony Khan took the high road, kind of, and said, good luck with the unbiased journalism. So Snowman, in reference to the cocaine allegations toward Tony Khan, kind of fucked up. That's kind of burying. I don't think you're going to get Tony on an interview.
Let's be honest about these cocaine allegations. Where are these coming from? This is IWC internet. Oh, he's a high-strung guy. He's on coke. I know Joey Janela, I think, gave an interview where he said that Tony will party and drink with the boys, or especially early on in the company, like befriending some of the boys. But this whole like cocaine thing has stemmed out of really just like fan rumor and Twitter bullshit. Like there's no substantiated anything behind it. It's funny. It's a funny online thing, but for ARIEL to throw that snowman shot, I was like, damn. Okay.
So a lot of their heat has been going back and forth because of the fact that Tony Khan was on ARIEL's show and he felt as if he wasn't giving him answers. ARIEL was highly critical of the interview after, saying it was frustrating. But we talked about it last week. When Tony wants to talk and he's asked the right questions, he will reveal a lot. He will talk in circles sometimes, but that's par for the course when you're doing an interview with anybody.
That's a promoter,
you have to ask the right questions.
Yeah, that's a promoter. I mean, he went on, I forget which event he was promoting. I think it might have been Arthur Ashe, the Arthur Ashe show.
I think so. Yeah, it was a while ago at this point.
Yeah, I think it was the Arthur Ashe immediately after Brawl Out. So Brawl Out was very in the news. He's in New York promoting the next Arthur Ashe Grand Slam show. And he goes on ARIEL HELWANI's MMA Hour, gives an interview, and then doesn't reveal a whole lot. And ARIEL was frustrated because all of the Brawl Out questions he was asking, all of the MJF contract questions he was asking, he was getting no sold. He was getting, I'm not going to comment on it. And then ARIEL, the next episode, kind of talks about how frustrating it was. We have a clip of it just to let you guys kind of know what ARIEL said to trigger TK feeling ill will towards him.
I look, whatever I'm going to say here is going to piss off the AEW supermarks. But I'll just say this. One of the most frustrating and, to a degree, not so fun interviews of my career. Because, as you may have seen, he didn't want to answer anything. Now, look, like you're going to come on and promote X, Y, and Z. Great. And I'll play that dance with you. And I did at the beginning. But you got to give us something. To not even tell me like how you were feeling. I'm not asking for specifics on, all right, fine, I asked, is Punk going to wrestle for you? Is he coming back? You don't want to get into it? Fine. But just tell me how you were feeling. Give me something. My feeling on that interview in short was, this is me just shooting right here. I feel like Tony Khan doesn't trust me. I feel like he doesn't really like me. And I feel like he came in there with his guard super up and didn't want to give me any sort of morsel, because he thought that if he opened the door a little bit, I would walk in and ask X, Y, and Z. And I tried to tell his people, like, yo, I have no allegiances to anyone. So I work for the British broadcaster of WWE. And watch this be cut up and watch all the marks. You know, my favorite thing about the crazy marks are they'll be like, oh, this is coming from, a guy who Nick Khan was his former agent. Every single time I talk about wrestling, I mention that, including in that interview, I mentioned it to him. And they love it. And you know what? I don't give a fuck. Enjoy. Have fun. But here's the thing. If you are saying right now with a straight face that the AEW product is better than the WWE product, you're just a liar. You're just an absolute liar. There's no if, ands, or buts. The WWE product is infinitely better, infinitely more interesting, and there's a freaking brawl happening backstage each and every week, it seems. Meanwhile, it's all kumbaya on the Stamford side of things. Like, if you're going to be a super fan, be a super fan, but also tell it like it is. 6 months ago wasn't the case. A year ago when Punk came back wasn't the case. When Bryan signed, when Moxie came, all that stuff wasn't the case. But right this second, if you're going to sit here and say that it's a better product, you're an absolute liar.
Go in, Chad. Go in.
So, all right. So this was, I full disclosure, that quote was taken maybe a month or so after the brawl out.
And we were very critical here on the Turnbuckle Tavern about what AEW was doing.
We were very critical of what they were doing, especially in the lead up to brawl out. Now, I think they started correcting the ship in the kind of aftermath of all of that. I think that's when we saw Moxley and Jericho and Danielson really have that backstage speech to the locker room, and everyone kind of rallied and got things on track. I am a longtime follower of Ariel Helwani. Like back to 2009. I was a huge MMA fan for probably about 15 years, watched every show, watched every pay-per-view, listened to the MMA Hour every Monday on MMAfighting.com. Like, I know Ariel. As far as a fan, like, it goes back to his MMA Fan House days when he first got his start. This is Ariel. Ariel has always kind of, and this isn't just a critique in the wrestling world. Like, a lot of MMA fighters say he's biased. A lot of MMA fighters say he has his favorites. He'll put over certain guys. He likes to kind of tout his journalistic integrity. And I think for the most part, Ariel is very talented at what he does. He's grew. I think he's won X amount of MMA Journalist of the Year awards. Like, he is very respected and he has a very loyal fan base. But dude, come on, man. Like, if you're a fan and you think he is not biased, in that clip we showed, I feel like he showed his bias.
Of course, yeah.
He showed his bias in that clip. I get it. You work for BT Sports in England that covers WWE. You're not getting a paycheck from WWE to do that. You're working for a company that covers WWE. So I'm not saying you're taking a paycheck from WWE, but let's go back to his interview with Triple H, where Triple H talked about his health scare. He asked him about MJF. He asked him about Bray Wyatt prior to Bray rejoining. He asked him about Sasha Banks. He was asking him, some topics that we wanted to know. But what was going on in the news at the time when he interviewed Triple H? What was the big hot button news? It was Vince McMahon and all of the sexual allegations. He softballed that. He didn't say anything. He didn't dig into the allegations. The only thing he asked about was how Triple H was handling the power shift. He didn't dig into what fans wanted to know. What's going on behind the scenes? So when you look at that, and then you look at the questions he goes after with Tony, the proof is in the pudding. He's softballing questions to the company that he is paid to cover. And then the other company, he's digging in. And when a guy says no comment about one question and you keep digging on that question and then you're upset that you couldn't get anything, to me, that reflects on you as a bad interviewer. And I don't think Ariel is a bad interviewer. I love his interviews. I thought the Triple H interview was good. It was a little bit of a softball interview, but it was a good interview. But when someone's not giving you something and you keep digging on that, that's on you, dude. That's not on him. He doesn't have to answer anything. It's up to you to find other things to pull out of him. If you're constantly, hey, what happened with Brawl Out? And he mentions in that clip we just played, well, you could have told me how you feel. You could have at least told me how you feel when it happened. We don't know the legalities of what he can and cannot say. Anything he said, because that was in the immediate aftermath of that.
Yeah, we're talking 2 weeks.
Anything he would have said could have been construed by either party, the Elite or Punk, as taking a side, as how did he feel. You don't want to say shit when it's so fresh and raw. You don't want to give any perception to anyone involved that you feel a certain way. So I take umbrage with Ariel saying that. But to me, if you know Ariel Helwani's history, if you know how he is, he's a bit of a crybaby. He always has been. Him and Dana White, he has a very contentious relationship with Dana White. Dana White banned him from UFC for a while. I mean, I think he's still banned. He can't go to events and cover the UFC fights because he broke the Brock Lesnar news coming back for a fight. Dana got pissed, blackballed him. He came on his show, cried about it, said he's taking his livelihood. Fans rallied behind Ariel against the big bad promoter. It was a moment, but he has a history of this. So I was not surprised. We'll talk about Tony's tweet here in a second, but just as far as like how Ariel handled this, Ariel talking about Tony like this, I wasn't shocked. This is par for the course with Ariel Helwani.
Yeah, agreed. And then when I listen to things like this, it again feels very biased. And I'm not as familiar as Ariel as you are. I only know him through the wrestling lens of seeing his interviews. But when you just watch that Triple H interview, everything's hunky dory. It feels like a political rhetoric thing where they're controlling the television and they're showing you like everything's great on WWE, but also in AEW things are hectic. And yeah, things were hectic, but there are other things that were going well for AEW and what he had accomplished prior to that. If he was unwilling to talk about Brawl Out, it's like going into a door that's continually locked. You got to find a different way in, Ariel. You have to find a different way to get some information, or end of the day, call the interview and don't air it. You know what I mean? Like if you're that frustrated with it and you don't think you should just close it up and say, you know what, we'll convene next time. Now at this point, Tony's never going to open up to you because now you're calling him names on Twitter. And yeah, the getting is good right now with WWE that you're showing up in Montreal, but what happens when it's not? And then all of a sudden that you now have alienated a whole company that you do not want to do business with. And WWE has shown that they're not loyal to any journalist. They're not loyal to any media source. If anyone's willing to take the interview, they will be somebody else in the future. And Ariel right now, he was on the pre-show for Elimination Chamber. It was in Montreal.
He was on SmackDown.
All of that. So right now it's good, like I said. But for now, if I'm a journalist looking to make money off of telling wrestling stories, I certainly would do my best to, even if I'm not biased, to play them down the middle. This way, Tony's going to be willing to tell you things in the future because now he's clamming up forever around you. And that, it sucks for you.
Oh, yeah. And if you look at the journalistic oath, and the tenets of journalism, he breaks a lot of those. I mean, he can sit here and say, I'm not biased. I've praised AEW.
Dude, he used the word infinitely better to describe WWE.
And he called fans liars.
And marks, he's using the word marks too. You're a mark too, by the way, Ariel Helwani. Like, come on. Like, we're all marks.
100%. And using insider lingo like that, I don't know, man. Just the way that right there was proof in the pudding of how he feels.
Yeah.
So he could have just gave his opinion on the interview, but he felt the need at the button of that little discourse he had on the interview. He felt the need to let fans know that you're wrong if you think this is better, that WWE is infinitely better. Newsflash, dude. Some people don't like the WWE product. I'm not like me. I think some of the stuff they do is great, but at the end of the day, I don't respond to the way they present their wrestling as much as I do to AEW. It doesn't make me I'm not discrediting the people that love WWE. If you love it, hey, that's your bag, man. Go love it. Go watch every Monday and Friday. That's cool. I prefer the product presented by AEW. Do they have the Bloodline story? No, they don't. Bloodline story is one of the great stories going on right now, probably the greatest. but everything else I'm not connected to. So for you to call me a liar that I enjoy this better than that instantly shows me that, yes, you are biased. You are biased. And before we get into the whole Twitter back and forth of what Tony said and all of this, Meltzer and Alvarez, they commented on Ariel talking about just the journalistic side of how to conduct an interview. And they talked about Ariel's response to this being the most disappointing interview he's gave. And I just thought it was interesting to hear these two guys, because Full Frontal, this isn't, if you know the relationship, this isn't just Dave Meltzer, the dirt sheet guy, commenting on this. Dave Meltzer and Ariel Helwani have a very close friendship. They work together. Dave actually was a correspondent for MMAfighting.com, who Ariel works for. So this isn't just some dirt sheet guy who doesn't know Ariel commenting on it. Dave has been on the MMA Hour with Ariel countless times. They work together. They are colleagues. So this is a friend commenting on this. This isn't some no-name guy. But yeah, here's Brian Alvarez and Dave Meltzer discussing Helwani's take on the interview.
There's a lot of stuff that you can talk about. That was frustrating about the comments that he was making. It's like, the guy's not going to talk about it. So you can't let that ruin the interview. I mean, I've done 1,000 interviews. Well, and there's things that people aren't going to talk about, and I move on.
There were also questions that people would think that I would ask, but the reality is I'd already asked them. And in certain cases, I'd gotten no answer. So it's like, I'm not going to go on there and ask a question that I already know he's not going to say because I've already asked it. So it's like, it's kind of like that. So I don't know.
You want to have a bad interview? Ask a whole bunch of questions you're not going to get an answer to. That's a bad interview. I know some people are like, oh, well, he asked the question. Well, he asked a question to get an answer. I mean, he's not going to talk about the fight. He's just not. And if you make it clear that you're not going to talk about the fight, because likely there are legal issues here.
Obviously, he wasn't going to talk about the fight.
Well, then you ask about the fight again, and he doesn't answer. I mean, at some point, it's like, stop asking about the fight. Like, there's a lot of stuff you can ask Tony Khan about, right?
There's a ton of stuff.
I love Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez's canter together. I sent you guys a clip. I think I sent it to you and Mike about the Titus O'Neil thing. He's big and he's tall and he goes, "Arr!" And that's the best Dave Meltzer quick of all time.
It's so great.
We need this a drop on here, I think.
Yeah, we do.
Oh my God.
Well, I mean, I think I echo what they say. We said it. That's on you, man. If the interview's bad, that's on you. If it's bad, it's on you. You're the interviewer. It's up to you to pull something out. But this tweet, I want to get your take on it, Ace, because everyone's talking about Tony Khan firing this off. You're a fraud, Ariel Helwani. You're as legitimate of a reporter as Tony Schiavone. Okay. The stigma out there with a lot of fans, you're kind of on one of two sides. There's the fans out there that think Tony should just keep his mouth shut, be professional, don't say anything. And then there's the fans out there that I love that he calls people out on things. He called out Nick Khan at one point. There's only room for one Khan in the wrestling business, blah, blah, blah. He's done this a lot. And a lot of people think it makes him look unprofessional in Bush League. And then other people love it. What's your take on Tony being so vocal like this on social media?
I love it. I mean, because if you look back at the best promoters in wrestling, they have been the most opinionated and loyal to their product, and they want to speak out when they feel like there's an injustice of opinion or perspective being skewed on them. So Tony could sit back and let people throw hours at him. But I mean, look at what would Paul Heyman do in 1996 if he had Twitter? What would Eric Bischoff do in 1997, 1998 in that Monday Night War when he had Twitter? Tony Khan was being nice here. Like, he could have went way out of his way to bury Ariel, and you and I were talking about it off air. You mentioned before, he could tweet the crying clip of him with Dana White on TV. He can go in on him, but he didn't. And I think he's just making it clear that you want to skew yourself as this combat sports journalist, but you're part of the scripted WWE lore. Like, that's his point. You are Tony Schiavone to WWE at this point. So anything you say has to be looked at with a skew and the air and veil of kayfabe. So now at this point, you're working everybody as well. So you can't play both roles right now. You can't say that you're an objective person if you're working on screen for WWE, and you are. I'm sure he was paid for those appearances in Montreal. So at this point, Tony has a point. And I'm completely okay with it. I would have been even okay with Tony going in even further.
I'm with you, man. I think a lot of people look at this and there's a little bit of Trump quality to this, not to get political, but you have your president firing off shots on Twitter. There's a little bit of that. This is the new age. This is Twitter. This is Instagram. People are going to fire off shit. Do I think a president should be doing that? Hell no. Keep that shit to yourself. But there is an aspect, like you said, man, this is a new age. Eric Bischoff on Twitter, Paul Heyman on Twitter. You mean to tell me during those heated rivalries back then, they wouldn't be saying things? Look at Dana White. Dana White never keeps his mouth shut. If Dana White has absolutely buried Bob Arum, the boxing promoter. He's absolutely buried Oscar De La Hoya. I mean, we're talking about burials way beyond expletive laced burials. Tony was being nice. I respect the fact people can say, "Oh, it's Bush League." No, WWE has earned the right, and I don't know if the right is the right word. They have established themselves as the industry standard, and they have such power within the pro wrestling space. Yeah, they don't do this stuff because they have established themselves to the point where they have a perception, a public perception. All of their dirty dealings is behind the scenes. If you think they're not screwing people over and doing things behind the scenes, you're insane. WWE is a clandestine cloak and dagger tactic type of company where everything they do is behind closed doors. It's business dealings. It's calling up arenas and being like, "Hey, if you let these guys run your building, we're not going to go there anymore." That's the type of business. They do it behind closed doors where you can't see it. Tony hasn't got that power yet. So his one way of hey, I'm not going to be pushed around, is to get on Twitter and let the entire public know I'm going to speak out about this. And I respect that. I love that he does that. I love that he calls people out and puts them on Front Street. And firing this off at Ariel when he talks shit about your interview and talks shit about your company, that your company's so much less. And then here you are surrounded by Montreal fans with a fucking WWE microphone in your hand. He called you out on it. If you're a fan that thinks that was a Bush League tactic, I don't know what to tell you, man. Is he supposed to just stay quiet and take it in the ass?
Right.
He spoke up. Respect for speaking up.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, to put a bow on that, exactly what you said, I echo your sentiments completely, is what would Vince McMahon of 97, 98 do as well? Vince himself, we're looking at the newsletter right now where Vince is in front of people. He went on, we're about to cover, and not to talk too much about the newsletter because I want you guys to watch Friday for Shot Nostalgia, but he goes on and puts Bret Hart on blast. He puts Bruno Sammartino on blast. He talks about Bob Costas. He goes off about people on a NBC channel where it's an interview about Mike Tyson coming over to wrestle for WrestleMania 14 or work at WrestleMania 14. And he's completely transparent, saying this guy's unprofessional. He thinks he's a bigger star than he is. He's a psychopath. I think he calls Ultimate Warrior an absolute insane person. So this is right now, WWE is a huge entity. They are the circus. They are the brand name. They're Coca-Cola. But there was a time they were making soda and putting every label on the bottle. They weren't always the machine they are now. Tony Khan's still in that stage where they're cementing what they are. They're in their infancy still. So Tony Khan has every right to fight back against the machine because he's the small guy. No matter how much money you throw at the wrestling company, as far as legacy and time goes, he's a smaller guy that has to punch from within because people are going to punch down and bully people that are come up as competition. And he's doing his best. And I, like you said, I respect him for saying the things he does.
Absolutely. And if you're a fan that thinks this is Bush League and WWE so much better than this, they would never do that. You have no historical perspective. You're a new fan or you don't remember history. because Vince did this all the time. Public burials in interviews. He didn't have Twitter. He had public interviews to bury people.
Dude, he was like fighting Bob Costas on live TV. Like
right on HBO Sports. Yeah.
Like Tony Khan, what he said is absolutely fine. Like there's
it's
nothing
tame compared to some of the things Vince has done in the public.
Or the stuff that Tony could have said. There's ammunition that is in that gun right now for him to fire off at Ariel to bury him.
Right. And it's so short-sighted, man. And like you said, Tony is trying to establish this company and give it an identity and not be pushed around. Like for him to just not say anything, I respect the guy. I think it's good.
All right, so let's get into our third story here. Elimination Chamber fallout. Of course, I wish we were on here discussing Sami Zayn winning the championship, but alas, here we are talking about Roman Reigns retaining in front of a raucous Montreal crowd. Messy finish, anticlimactic, but before we get into the missed moment, just go through some other results. Brock gets DQ'd against Bobby Lashley. We're getting more build to Mania. Logan Paul cost Rollins the U.S. title. But I guess the main thing to discuss here, I guess the Logan Paul match, I guess we could talk about. They're building up the match as a cookie cutter. This is like cost someone at the Rumble, build it up. I have no problem with it. I think the match is going to be absolutely probably match of the night, honestly.
Oh, it's going to be great.
Physicality-wise, but
it's going to be great.
I think, for Rollins to have a showcase match like this, it speaks a lot to how much they trust him to work with a guy. And of course, Logan Paul has shown in the last couple of matches that he can go off and kill it. But Rollins is getting a showcase match. It's going to be on a huge stage. We saw Miz in the Super Bowl commercial, that Logan Paul commercial for his energy drink. So Rollins is going to be featured in a big way for an audience that they're probably unfamiliar with his work. So this is a big moment for Seth as well.
Yeah. And the one thing the one thing that worries me about this Seth Logan Paul match is, man, they don't let Seth win that much. Like he's been taking big Mania losses. Like what, he got beat by Cody last year, right?
Yep.
I don't know, man. Do you see him beating Logan Paul at Mania? I don't.
Probably not. And I guess that this speaks to Seth Rollins, the professional and the character he is. And we literally, they leaned into it. The Joker image. He is the Joker to Roman Reigns' Batman, where he can lose and come and bounce back. That's the beautiful part about the character now. But at some point, people are going to really stop believing him as a title contender. And I think that's a conversation for a completely other time. Losing 3 straight matches to Cody Rhodes, like that has to be damaging down the road. You're back in the mid card for the U.S. title again. So now you're on the sub main event. Logan Paul, it's a huge celebrity match. It's a huge place to be. But as far as Seth Rollins, he should be up at the upper echelon. And I think that's kind of the culture that's been built around Roman Reigns' title reign, approaching 1,000 days in like the next couple months or so, is we're looking at everything's about Roman and the shrapnel that falls off of this reign as people get damaged. Like Seth Rollins has lost more than he's won. And Kevin Owens has lost multiple times to Roman Reigns. So the rest of the roster looks lesser than, but I guess that's more of the conversation to transition to the Sami Zayn match. And I guess your thoughts on this. The crowd was obviously hot. This is the hottest WWE crowd I've seen since probably Chicago with CM Punk.
Yeah.
Maybe the Bryan Danielson stuff with the Wyatt family, like that level of involvement, which had me believing for a second, maybe they'd have the courage to change the script. Wouldn't be easy, obviously, because there's a whole bunch of stuff and stock in what you were already doing with Cody Rhodes. But the WWE, the WWF I love would pivot and have a different plan in place and follow the organic path that's been laid out for them. Because now, if you guys have seen my Instagram post, I posted a picture of Generico and Steen in their old picture. This is a missed moment. No matter how you do this, Sami can win the title next month. Sami can win the title at SummerSlam. You'll never have this moment in Montreal back. And that's sad to me. I had an empty feeling after watching that event because Sami had that place going crazy, and you kind of deal with the fallout after it happens. Like at some point, Roman is going to lose. And if it's going to be to Cody, Cody's already established. Like we just talked about, he beat Seth 3 times. You give Cody the rub from Roman. It's almost like he's giving him the same power. They're already main eventers. You have the opportunity to make Sami into that other star that could be revolutionary for the brand going forward. And yes, he doesn't fit the archetype of what you want. Triple H called him a Mick Foley adjacent pretty much in the press conference. Mick Foley was fucking legendary.
Yeah.
Like, it's a missed opportunity, and that's all I felt about it. Like, seeing how over choreographed the ending was, how messy it was, the ref bumps, the visual pins, no matter what you did, everyone went home unhappy. And it would be like as if Punk lost in Chicago, or RVD lost at One Night Stand, or having Bryan Danielson come up short to win the title, Kofi Mania not happening. Like, you're not reading the room, guys.
I'm with you. I think this is par for the course, though, with modern WWE. I feel like they always miss the big moments and they give them to you too late. It's like when, a UFC fight or a boxing match, like Pacquiao and Mayweather. For years, fans wanted Pacquiao versus Mayweather. We wanted it. We kept calling for it. Years go by. We finally get it. And it's when they're kind of on the tail end of their career and they're not, it's not what it could have been when the fans started wanting it. And I feel like WWE has kind of grown a reputation of that. Like, they might give us a mulligan after the fact. Oh, here's his title. But it will, like you said, they missed an opportunity where with that crowd as hot, and I'm with you, man, that was one of the greatest crowds I've seen since maybe the Yes Movement or Punk in Chicago. Like, it was hot, man. Those soccer chants.
We haven't seen that, like, since AEW has been built. It was like that was the old crowd that would fight back against the machine. Those people, I mean, Montreal was thirsty for Sami Zayn to win, and they just didn't give it to him.
And I get that they have a plan. I get that, they've probably got this mania moment in their mind with Cody and Roman, and I don't have a problem necessarily with them still pushing towards Cody Roman, because, man, I think there's something special there too. But the fact that it looks like we're maybe pushing towards a Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, Usos that there's no meat on the bone for that for me.
Right.
I feel like they haven't mapped that out right. The Jay situation, the flip-flopping back and forth, I don't care anymore.
Right.
His fence riding, I think that's the weakest part of the Bloodline story, is the way they've handled Jay. Like, at a certain point, make your mind up, man. Like, he joined, he left, now he's on the fence. Is he going to, if he goes back with Jimmy and the match we get is Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens for the titles against the Usos, I really don't care. I just don't care about that. I would rather see the Uso, like Jay, make his stand and be like, no, I'm not with this. And him and Jimmy have a brother versus brother match is more compelling to me than just riding that fence and not making a decision. And I think they think there's drama in that. What's he going to do? But when the way they've handled it is the way Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy was handled with the turn with Christian in AEW. I thought it was garbage. Like, they flip-flopped Luchasaurus too much. It made me not care, and it ruined the angle. And I'm not saying this is ruining the Bloodline angle, because everything else is rolling really well and being told, but I don't know. I haven't liked the way. That's what I didn't like about this. I think it's setting Sammy up for a match that is beneath him at this point. He deserved a bigger moment in that in Montreal.
Yeah, and they're cautiously stepping around what they wanted to do. They did everything but have Sammy win. He had 2 visual pins, you had 2 ref bumps, you had Jimmy come out, and then Jay came out. You did everything, but you know what? If your confidence is our plan was always Roman to win, have Roman win. Just don't even muddy it with everything else, because it makes everybody look stupid, because now Roman looks like he's weaker than he already might as well have lost to Sammy. So you might as well pull the trigger. And I understand, like, you have a plan in place, but this also damages Cody down the line too, because what happens if people, and we have traveling fans that go there, some fans probably from Montreal, they may hold this against Cody because they didn't want Cody in that spot. And that sucks for Cody because Cody deserves a huge moment. And maybe at the Rumble, you should have gotten the room together and said, you know what? Maybe Cody's crowning moment will be SummerSlam. We didn't read this as being the roadmap we were going on with Sami Zayn, but they should have had Sami win the Rumble. Cody wasn't even in the mix until SummerSlam, and have Cody do something else important at WrestleMania. And then you go on with the Cody plan from, mid-spring till SummerSlam, build that up, have him get the Winged Eagle title. Everybody wins. You have a huge star in Cody. Now you have Sami Zayn, who's a former champion with huge moments under his belt. I don't know. Like I said, missed opportunity. And that sucks, man, because wrestling, and WWE likes to say this all the time. They always put this on Front Street, as you like to say. They're all about moments. And how do you miss that obvious moment last night? Like I said, having Punk lose in Chicago, that was akin to that. Or having John Cena go in and retain against RVD. And I understand, like, if they had two different titles, that's why Kofi Mania, people want to be like, well, they pivoted on Kofi. Not really, because the WWE title at the time was looked at as lesser than. Like, they had it in a mid-match of the show. Yeah. They had the flexibility. And if they had the title separated, if Roman only was Universal Champion and the WWE Championship was on somebody else, they would have figured out a way to put a title on Sami because it's a consolation prize. But they put all their eggs in one basket, which I enjoy. Almost 1,000-day reign, historic. But if you're looking to give that rub, which at this point you're accumulating all this power coming from Roman's reign, going to somebody else, it doesn't seem like Cody needs it. Cody's already there. It's like giving, the Taker streak to Lesnar. He didn't need it. So you're passing, follow that legacy from that rub from the Taker streak, went to Roman, and now Roman's giving it to Cody. You had a chance to build someone who was looked at as a mid-carder for his whole career. The story writes itself, and WWE missed the boat.
Do you think Sami should have won the titles at Elimination Chamber?
I think so. I think they should have done that and found a different way, make it a triple threat match, put Roman Reigns in the match with Cody. The problem was, I think going back, the story should have been Sami in the Rumble, and Sami should have won the Rumble, have Cody not in the mix, and then have that story be told. Sami versus Roman. It's tales all this time. It's been building for over 18 months, and that would have been WrestleMania moment.
That's my one. I think they screwed themselves with the way they laid out the Rumble, because I don't think Sami should have won at Elimination Chamber, just for the sheer fact of, I think Roman should go into Mania as champion. That's the moment to lose those belts. Grandest stage of them all. But this elimination, let's be honest, this is like Fastlane, man.
Right.
This is a stopover to get to Mania. You can't, it's like cutting your nose off to spite your face. You can't drop those titles at the speed bump before Mania. Having said that, I know it's Montreal. It's like the story didn't match up with the cities they had booked for these events, because I just think Montreal was Sami a little over a month out from Mania. It was laid out wrong to me.
Well, they had no idea that this was going to catch fire. They thought it would be a sub story for Roman. Oh, he overcame and everyone was behind Sami, but like, let's look towards Cody and have, rah like Bret Hart at WrestleMania 9 in Hogan's corner. Sami would be like rallying behind Cody, like, do what I couldn't do.
Yeah.
It didn't work out like that.
That's where I'm with you, that there was a moment to be had. You had this hot crowd, hometown crowd for Sami, but where I kind of divert from your opinion is, I never think Roman should drop these titles in any way, shape, or form except Mania. Like, this dude's on an iconic 900+ day run as champion. If you're going to put someone over, regardless if it's Sami, Cody, whoever, the moment to do that is WrestleMania.
So that brings us to what people are saying. Possibly 2 nights defending both titles. And that puts you in a difficult spot because someone has to pin Reigns first, and it takes away the allure of someone pinning him second, unless he retains against somebody. If you do Sami versus Roman, Sami, who knows? But I think he should win, and then maybe Cody doesn't win the title. Like, I don't fucking know what you do, but I think Sami should have it's a tough, again, like we mentioned, go back to the story. I think the one thing that's in there is that Sami should have won the Rumble and Cody wasn't involved until he's ready to be fully invested in the championship. And he didn't have to be yet. Like, if you're reading what was going on, even building up to the Rumble when they announced Cody'd be in there, Sammy had all the momentum behind him. So you just like, you know what? Let's put this on ice for 1 second. We'll get back to Cody. Let Sammy have a 4-month run, similar to Bryan's first run. You know, like Bryan can have a little bit of a run, and then you go on. Like, because people forget, after the Yes Movement, Bryan didn't hold the championship for a long time. Like, after he won the title at WrestleMania 30, it was only for a short period of time, but people remember the moment. Like, that's what would be same thing with No Way Out 04 when Eddie won. Everybody remembers that moment. Yeah. Now they can't show that anymore.
No, I'm with it. It's a very tricky booking spot to be in, man, because like you said, if you beat Roman, or if you have him defend the titles both nights at Mania, whoever's second on night 2, it takes steam out of them.
Yep.
And so it's like you almost have to go both belts. Like, you can't split the titles up. Like, they're in a spot where I just think, like, my big hitch with all of this, and it affects everything. Cody, Sammy, all. I'm just a firm believer that Roman should not lose until he loses both of the belts. And I think it has to be at Mania. So everything else revolves around that. And I think all of the booking to get to that point should have been the direction. I think the Royal Rumble threw a wrench in that. I think Sammy getting this groundswell of organic support in this storyline threw a wrench in that. I think Cody getting injured threw a wrench in that. Like, there's all these things that they're trying to pivot and work with. Hats off to them for trying to make it work. I think Cody, Roman at Mania was always the plan. And then Sammy, in Cody's injury, Sammy became this just heater of a star.
Yeah.
And then you've got Montreal, but you don't want to take the steam off of this just absolutely legendary dominant run from Reigns. So it's hard, man. I get it. Like, anything you do is going to trickle down and affect everything. This isn't just affecting Reigns. This is affecting Sammy, Cody. This is affecting Jay and Jimmy as tag champions. This is affecting Kevin Owens.
Right.
Like, everything. This is such a delicate booking position to be in, because we're talking about maybe one of the greatest WWE storylines of the last 20, 25 years. You know, it's up there.
Yeah, and I mentioned in the group chat, it felt like Lex Luger at SummerSlam 93 with the confetti falling down after winning by DQ. That's what it was. The Lex Express, the Sami Zayn Express was going down the road for hitting all these cities, going all there. People are getting behind him. And he plays his music at the end after a losing effort, after a very muddied, contrived finish. It was just like, it was a disaster at the end. The match was good. The energy was good. It was Hogan, Rock, a Jace in Toronto. Like, that's how it felt. They didn't even touch and people were going crazy. And that's what, like, one of the craziest parts too. I was watching this, and when you watch guys, and I love AEW and I love all the action that gets brought to the high indie levels and New Japan Pro Wrestling. But when you have people emotionally invested, it doesn't matter what they do. They did headlocks and lockups and shoulder blocks. And when wrestling is resonating, like, go back to Hogan Rock at WrestleMania 18. It was literally just very simplistic. You take away the crowd. It was just one of those like simple matches, and the crowd went nuts. And Sammy could have done anything. Like, Sammy was just standing there flexing. The match
was not anything like
it was
extravagant.
It was a moment that they missed. That's
exactly,
the whole thing.
Exactly. And what the beauty of that match was, it was a perfect example of how important storytelling and character are. The people cared because of the story that they told leading up to that moment. That's what made that moment. The match didn't matter. They could have done anything, but like you said, you put a headlock on, the crowd's losing their shit. That's why that match was good. But I'm with you. I think the ending was just a shit show, in my opinion. The way the overuse of ref bumps, the Jimmy, and it just became convoluted.
It was 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Like, they wanted to commit, like they wanted Roman to win, but they didn't know how to get there. But they wanted Sammy to be looked at as this strong competitor, and it came off as both guys looking weaker in the moment, and that sucked. Because again, if you're going to go all in on Roman and say, which they continue to do, and say Sammy's losing, have the courage to just fucking do it. Like just do it then.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Or you know
dude.
what? Also build up to that tag match too. Jay, like, and I know you talk about him doing double turns, but at least we'd have a clear path for Sammy and Kevin going into WrestleMania. Because now if it happens on SmackDown, Jay didn't do anything. Like Jay should have hit Sammy with the chair and then that'd be the end of it. Now we have a clear path for both guys. And it seems like it could be Jimmy and Jay. It could be Jay and Jimmy versus Sammy and Kevin. We don't know where they're going. And that sucks because these guys are the biggest storytellers in all of wrestling aside from Roman himself. And they don't have a direction where they're going for WrestleMania, and they deserve a really big platform.
Yeah, I feel anything they do, I don't think they can. I'm not saying they won't be able to pull out something good for the Usos, but they missed something where it's not going to be what it could have been because they've muddied it a little too much for me. I think they're pushing Jay out of a situation where he could have played a way bigger part in the Roman situation. Now it's like he's being pushed off to a tag match, or even if he goes against Jimmy, I feel like, it all started with Jay and Roman. People, that was the story. That the Usos aspect of the bloodline story has always been the weak point for me as far as lately. I feel like they've dropped the ball on what they set up. And now they're in a tough spot with Zayn and Rhodes. There's a lot of moving parts, man. Like I said, there's a lot of moving parts.
So before we move on to the quick hitters, I think the thing that they should have done is imagine the moment. I know it's not WrestleMania. I know it's not the biggest stage, but if Jay would have cost Roman the championship right there in the same way that Sammy turned on, dude, that moment would live forever. And like wrestling's about moments, and that would have been absolutely epic to see Roman get cost the title and Jay and Sammy celebrating at the end. I know that there's no clear path to WrestleMania after that, but sometimes you just got to live in the moment. And to me, like that you missed that opportunity. Now it's like, oh, Jay's kind of with Roman. Now he's kind of with Sammy. He's unsure what he wants to do. I don't know. I felt empty.
I felt empty too. It's just, this was a weird stop too close to Mania. I feel like all these big, great moments we're talking about, these are moments that are Mania moments. These aren't Elimination Chamber a month out from Mania moments. Like it doesn't feel like that's the trickiness. That's the trickiness of this story, is just you're serving too many masters. You have too many events to put things in, and you have to expertly lay out the path. And I feel like Elimination Chamber, it shouldn't have happened there, but it was a moment where, like, hey, you got to give us something big. Look at this crowd. Look at Zayn. I'm very torn on this because they've laid a path out that I think it's going to be very difficult to give all of those moments to us the way we want them.
And I know it's hindsight right now and we're able to look at it with a little more clarity, but what happens if you just push the Sammy turn from Rumble to there and have him wrestle or be in the corner or be in a tag match? You could have just done Roman and Sammy versus Kevin and somebody else and have that match, and then Sammy turns on. Then they have that moment in Montreal, and then you move on to WrestleMania, or you don't. But that moment takes place in Montreal, and you're not leaving people leaving empty. At least they had that moment with Sammy, and that will live in Montreal. Can you imagine? San Antonio reacted the way they did. Can you imagine what Montreal would have done with the Sammy turn?
I know.
All right, let's get into the quick hitters. We got a lot of news to break down.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, some quick hitters. And first things first, we want to give our condolences to the Jarrett family. Jerry Jarrett passed away early last week. And Jeff Jarrett worked Dynamite despite the loss of his dad. We had a lot of stuff. And I always talk about this with Meltzer. One of his best things he does is eulogize wrestlers or contributors to the wrestling business in the newsletter. About a 25-page eulogy for Jerry Jarrett and the influence of, his great wrestling mind and the key figure in the territory days, and Memphis wrestling built around his mindset, and his legacy will live on forever. But rest in peace to Jerry Jarrett. And, it's tough. So the only way to deal with it is get in the ring and wrestle like Jeff did.
Yeah, hats off to Jeff. And I feel like it's kind of a shame for the modern wrestling fan because everyone has this idea of Jerry Jarrett based on something to wrestle with Bruce Pritchard and him doing the Jerry Jarrett impression. And they've got this stigma of what Jerry Jarrett is, but he was a genius wrestling mind in the territory days, man. Very influential. I think Memphis Wrestling had the highest rating of any wrestling program at the time it was airing. I mean, this was a very popular show. A lot of the storytelling, he was big on promos. He was big on storytelling. A lot of the things that was kind of birthed in Memphis Wrestling has became what we know as the modern way to show wrestling on television. Like Jerry Jarrett was very, very, very influential in that. And it's beyond just the potato salad recipe that right. Bruce Pritchard used to give. You know, this guy was
yeah, he was
groundbreaking, man. And all the best to the Jarrett family, because there's not many of those old territory minds left. We're losing them all. That was an era that was that birthed what we love today.
Yeah, and you mentioned before, Memphis was just way ahead of the curve with what they were doing with the characters and the angles, unique gimmicks, and in the late 80s and the 90s, I mean, they moved away from that. So I think you have to look at what was built upon as far as what wrestling is today. Couldn't be built on if Memphis and the other territories weren't there, and Jerry Jarrett played a huge part of that. So yeah, his legacy will live on through wrestling that exists, especially Memphis-style wrestling with very story-driven storylines that go into the programs that we see, like similar to behind the scenes, unique characters, building up sympathy for the faces and making those heels extra.
Very smart business mind. And I think that, TNA, he had a backing with Jeff Jarrett, very smart guy. All the best to the family.
Like I said, go into the newsletter from this week and check out the eulogy from Dave Meltzer. Like I said, it's fascinating because there's stuff in there that most people don't realize happened. But let's get into the backstage locker room meeting that was called with Thunder Rosa and AEW. And Fightful reported that they had a meeting in the women's locker room last week to repair, this is a quote, to repair some of the damage done last year between Rosa and other members of the roster. So lost in all this CM Punk brawl out stuff was the drama with Thunder Rosa in the women's division. She's kind of went away. They're trying to heal the wounds, trying to bring her back. She was doing play-by-play. We talked about it last week on the Spanish commentary team. But her women's title reign was underwhelming, to say the least. But yeah. I think she's missed in the women's division. I think she could be used if they're able to put their differences aside. But I guess this is precedent setting for eventually mending fences with other people that may have left the company with a bad taste in their mouth.
No, similar to the brawl out, this is one of those situations where she had to get in a room and talk to the roster, because there was tons of claims with Thunder Rosa. And I feel like that backstage heat was kind of what maybe affected the on-screen product of her title run, because sure. I think the fact that she was maybe so unpopular with the roster affected the way Tony Khan booked her a little bit, because we called her the top of the ramp champ on the flagship show. And sources claim that this backstage meeting she had with the rest of the talent, it was to kind of mend fences on all the issues like working stiff, sandbagging, and the legitimacy of her injury, because she's out with that back injury. Evidently the meeting was productive. She addressed all the concerns that everyone had. Hopefully this allows everyone to have a clean slate moving forward. I do think if she comes back, it will be good for the women's division, because she never lost that title. So she could instantly become a challenger in a storyline with the world title. But we'll see how it goes. I like Thunder Rosa. I do think that her title reign was underwhelming, though.
We also had the Wrestling Observer, as we talked about before, Brian Alvarez was talking about potentially a main roster call-up around WrestleMania season. So he says the loser of Braun Breaker and Carmelo Hayes at NXT's Stand and Deliver during WrestleMania weekend will be called up. I'm assuming both these guys seem like they're ready to be on the main roster. Hopefully there's a spot and place for them. I know that Booker T was a little bit critical. Who else was he? I mean, he's critical of a lot of guys, but Braun Breaker was in his scope a little bit about being critical, saying he doesn't have the same edge as his dad. That was, quote unquote, not exactly, but I love both these guys. I think they have a huge spot on the roster. Carmelo Hayes and Braun Breaker are reasons to watch NXT, and there aren't many reasons to watch them. These two guys are.
Yeah, I think both guys could be I think Braun Breaker has a little bit more upside to come right into maybe the top of the card picture. Carmelo Hayes, I could see him coming in big. He's talented too, but I would see him maybe getting pushed into that mid-card US title, Intercontinental title. And maybe they would do that to Braun Breaker too. I do think Braun Breaker needs a little bit of an edge. He's great in the ring. He sounds exactly like his uncle in promos. But I'm still I know everyone's really, really high on Braun Breaker. I hate the name. Give him the Steiner name. Come on, man. But I want to see him get a little more seasoned when he comes to the main roster, because I know some people's like, oh, he's an instant challenger to the world title. I don't see that. I think he needs to get up there and, mix it up with the Drew McIntyres and the Kevin Owens and those guys, and let's see what he's got.
It would be nice for him to debut in a main event slot, like instead of just coming from underneath, like Karrion Kross. Like, think about how Karrion Kross was brought in both times under Vince's regime with the mask on and coming in and attacking, Drew McIntyre and Roman Reigns in the beginning. So like that was really the divide. I think I'm not saying Braun is to win the title. I think if he's in a program main event, like you mentioned Drew, I think he'd be the perfect first opponent for him. Backlash would be amazing.
Yeah, with Karrion, they really dropped the ball, because I thought he came in hot attacking Drew, and then they immediately put the brakes on him, because sometimes those big guys, they don't need to build. Fans will buy in if you just push them to the top instantly. And maybe maybe they saw something in Karrion that made them put the brakes on, but I hope that's not the case with Braun. I wonder how the main roster people will react to Breaker. I really do.
Yeah, it could be either he gets the Lesnar treatment or he gets Chad Gable's treatment. Like, it's one or the other. So I guess we have to wait and see about it. All right. So Ring of Honor's weekly program is returning. You guys have been seeing this all over my social media and checking out all the ROH stuff. But Tony Khan did announce this last week on Sports Illustrated that the weekly television program will begin Thursday, March 2nd, and will be available to watch on Honor Club. And the first tapings will take place February 25th and 26th at Universal Studios. This is where they've been taping Dark. So I think it's going to be in conjunction with doing Dark. So it's not going to have any real burden on the team of the production team. I think it's going to be kind of par for the course. They're going to just replace like an elevation taping with ROH was what we talked about. But looking forward to it. I can't wait to find the time. It's going to be available on demand. It's going to air live. All good stuff. But we talked about this in the wrap up. I think this is a really good time for AEW to really expand and separate those rosters and let it breathe a little bit.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what they do. I think it's perfect timing. Obviously, it'll give them about a month of TV to push Supercard of Honor. I'm excited to see what the roster looks like what's the stories they're going to be telling. So I'm pumped for weekly ROH programming.
So Kenny Omega appeared on the Swerve City podcast, and he talked about a lot of things, and we'll talk about one of the other things he talked about. But the first thing, and probably the most meaningful thing, was talking about Cody Rhodes and praising him for the work he did at the beginning of AEW. And Kenny's been pretty quiet on the Cody front until now. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think he's spoken about Cody at all, but he was pretty candid about him in this interview. And Swerve City podcast is pretty well done. He has decent guests, and they talk about an eclectic mix of things, not just wrestling, about video games, about real life. They were talking about anxiety. Like it was a really good breath of fresh air, because we consume so many wrestling podcasts. It wasn't just about the bell to bell and outside the ropes, all that stuff. It was more about these guys are as people. But anyway, he really thought about things that they didn't think of as the professional wrestlers when they started AEW. And he said the fourth EVP, we can't mention his name. Just kidding. It's Cody. He really, I will assume this is just from knowledge of being in the business all his life, because he was born into the business and he understood a lot from his father. He knew what we needed. He knew what we needed to line up and the things I couldn't get. I've got good contacts with any of the unsigned Japanese talents. I can be that guy. The Bucks be like, we know great guys from SoCal or indie guys. Continues down the line. Not going to read the whole quote, but he talked about doctors, the people you need in the back, production guys. Cody, the Bucks and Omega were thinking more, how can we stack this roster with all the guys we know that we worked with from PWG elsewhere? And Cody's like, dude, we need someone to do the lights. We need someone to do, who's going to clean the ring? Who's going to help pack this up? We need trucks, like stuff that you don't think about, that I'm sure they were like, oh shit, thank God we have Cody.
No, yeah, I think that's things fans didn't take into consideration of Cody's contributions is, Tony Khan didn't know all that. He wasn't a wrestling guy. He was the money backer, the fan, but Cody was definitely the guy who knew, like, hey, there's a lot of moving parts we need, because he's been like, Dusty was very influential in every place he ever worked, so I love that Omega's coming out and giving Cody props, because if you've been watching Cody's interviews lately, he's been giving props to those guys, because there was those rumors that the Elite, they don't like each other, and that's kind of been dispelled. If you've been listening to all of the Elite's interviews, they're praising everyone. Cody gave the too sweet sign at Royal Rumble. I think there's a lot of mutual respect from those guys that is there, that no matter what the dirt sheets say or what fans want to allude to, I think they have a bond that will always be there.
So we also have some news about Ronda Rousey getting her chops in acting here. And Giant Freaking Robot is a publication, I believe, talking about upcoming Marvel movies. So she's going to apparently, or they're in talks to play the role of Thundra in Marvel's Captain America New World Order. This is the latest wrestler turned actor, or aspiring to be an actor. This is a big deal for Ronda to be involved in Marvel.
Yeah, I think that's where she go do that. I'm not a Ronda fan. I don't like the way she treats fans, and that the way she treated her MMA fans that were loyal to her, the way she treated WWE fans when she left the first time. I'm not big on Ronda Rousey.
Well, we'll see how I love the Marvel Captain America series, so we'll see how she plays Thundra. I'm not in the weeds as far as the comic books go, so I'm curious
Winter Soldier. I loved Winter Soldier. It was a great one.
Mark Briscoe is officially All Elite, so immediately following Dynamite, Tony Khan tweeted that Mark Briscoe was All Elite. I asked you, Chad, I think you and I are on the same page here. Plans for Mark going forward has to be with ROH to begin, right?
Yeah, I think he's going to play a major part in Ring of Honor. You can't have a Ring of Honor without Mark Briscoe, but I think Tony wants to give him that national, now that he's allowed to, damn you, Warner Media. Like, I think he wants to give him that exposure that the Briscoes always deserved. So I'm wondering how they did the contract. Is it 2 contracts? Is it, because I know they had the exclusive ROH deal. Did he sign another contract? But I love getting Mark Briscoe on my weekly television, regardless if it's ROH or AEW.
We did just talk about Elimination Chamber, and Roman's streak as a champion hits a milestone. He just passed 900 days as champion. He's 5th all time. And the next to catch, I compiled a list here. Pedro Morales, 1,027 days will be the next up to catch. And he seems like, I don't know what the date from now to WrestleMania. If he loses at WrestleMania, I don't think he's catching Pedro, but Bruno Sammartino is 1,237, Hogan, 1,474. And then you hit the big hitters, 2,135 for Bob Backlund, and Bruno Sammartino, 2,803 days, untouchable.
Yeah, I don't think they're ever getting caught by anybody.
No, I agree. MLW signs a UK TV deal. So Eyes is at TV and will be aired on Monday nights on Sky Channel 191 in the United Kingdom beginning on March 6th. And according to the announcement, it will be the same MLW Underground program that is available in the US on Reel's channel, meaning the partnership will be able to bring the current rivalries and storylines to the fans of the British cable television. So MLW continuing to stay relevant. We know UK is a huge market. AEW thrives there. So MLW trying their hand at getting some exposure.
Making some moves. I mean, I like it for all of those wrestlers that are signed to that company, because there's a lot of talented guys there. I think this is good for MLW.
And Trish Stratus was originally booked for last Monday's Raw, according to Wrestling Observer newsletter. And this is what Dave said. She would have likely been there to build toward the rumored Damage Control versus Becky Lynch, Lita, and Trish match, but Dakota Kai's injury put those plans on hold. And Meltzer writes that the Trish Stratus angle isn't dead. So they love to bring back those Attitude Era, ruthless aggression stars back. Seems like she's going to be joining Lita. We saw Lita come back in the cage match, so Trish is right behind her.
I'm shocked they haven't brought back Lita and Trish in a fashion like this yet. I mean, the fact that it hasn't happened.
Well, they brought Lita back and Trish back for the Saudi shows, I think, but I think you're right, like not on a full scale program.
Yeah, and like again, where we're seeing them on our weekly television.
100%. They still have a lot to give. They both look great in the ring, and Lita, Trish, we go back to that 2003 women's main event on Raw, which was a huge deal. They talk about women's revolution. That's a huge point of it.
Huge.
Mike Tyson was in the news, and it's weird because it's serendipity with shot nostalgia. I feel like all I do is talk about Mike Tyson nowadays with WWF 1998, but he was on a podcast and he was talking about going to work with WWE and AEW. And he said, Tony Khan and those guys, yeah, these guys want to put me on the show and stuff before, but I don't care if they got more money. If Vince McMahon put me in the show, I'd rather go there, even though AEW pays more money. Taker was also involved in this podcast, and he said, I don't blame you there. It's going to get much more play. WWE is going to do it right. Yeah. Tyson, famously, AEW was falling asleep at the first ever TNT championship match at Double or Nothing.
Yeah.
But, have their opinions. It's a podcast called Hoxing. This is Mike Tyson's podcast, and podcast will correct me because he's a guy who has been consuming all of the Tyson. So Hotboxing is a Mike Tyson podcast. But, man, I don't know. This seems like more homerism from Mike Tyson. He's looking to get a payday from Vince.
Yeah, he's got the history with WWE. He's got Undertaker on his show. What's he going to say? I wonder what Tony Khan thought of this, because I know him and Mike are supposedly buddies. But of course, WWE does have more reach than AEW. It's just a fact. I wasn't surprised by this. I wasn't. It did surprise me that AEW paid more, but yeah, it's par for the course. Of course, you would say that. And Undertaker, I don't blame you there.
No,
it's going
to
give much more
play.
play.
Taker would be like, I actually would have liked to be in AEW, by the way, like Magic.
Right.
So, all right. We also have the Trios champion, Kenny Omega. He's also the reigning IWGP US champion. He was appearing on the Swerve City podcast, as we mentioned before, but he also talked about, why is the AEW Fight Forever game not out yet? And he said what's holding them back is the ESRB rating, which is the Entertainment Software Rating Board, giving Fight Forever a teen rating. And there have been rumors on the mature rating going back and forth. And he has a lot of quotes about this. Go check it out. But essentially, Kenny Omega makes it clear that you could have done anything to make the ring look like a murder scene. So they didn't want all the blood and the guts that you guys can see there, thumbtacks and barbed wire. So they had to go back in and fix some of the stuff. And they were joking around saying to Kenny, is this game actually coming out? And he said, and I quote, it's coming out. I'm not sure how much we had to scale it back, but man, I loved it. You could make the ring look like a murder scene if you wanted to. I just hope there's still some way to get the semblance of that. Hope we don't dumb it down too much. It was fun. It's what we get on TV every week anyway. And it could gory, but no one's getting dismembered. No one is dying. Maybe it could look that way if you beat someone up that bad. There are things we haven't shown in the game yet. And it's a really interesting perspective from Kenny. He's a big video game guy. He knows what people like. And I think a big piece of what we're doing here with Kenny Omega is he is feeling the heat because the game isn't out yet. This has No Mercy feel, WrestleMania 2000 on N64 feel, arcade feel. Everyone's so stuck on these guys look boxy. They don't look like. I'm okay with this, maybe because I'm, a 90s kid. I love games that are arcade and give me matches to play. Give me things to do in the game. Make it cool so I can have my 35-year-old plus friends over, drink some beers, eat some pizza, and play a tournament on these games. I haven't had that experience with a wrestling game probably since SmackDown vs. Raw, which came out, 20 years ago at this point.
I'm with you. The WWE 2K games are really well done, but I'm not a huge gamer, so it's like the learning curve is too high. I like the old school NWO, WCW World Tour type games, the WrestleMania 2000 on 64, all of those games, because it wasn't too complicated. You could just go in and have fun. And I hope that's what this game is, because I would buy it.
We should have a Turnbuckle Tavern tournament. We'll go over, get some controllers, get some beers, and hang out in the Turnbuckle Tavern flagship studios for that.
That'd be great.
And we'll live stream it. Maybe Freems can put it on his Twitch channel.
Yeah.
Bray Wyatt has issued a challenge to the winner of Saturday's Brock Lesnar versus Bobby Lashley bout, not taking into account that Bobby won by DQ, but seems like they're going in a direction. Like he said, the winner of Lesnar versus Lashley, and I quote, should run. What the fuck are they doing with Bray Wyatt? Like, that's the direction you're taking, and it's going to be Bray versus Lesnar. I wanted Lesnar versus Gunther. So is it going to be Lashley versus Bray? Where the hell is the story there? And this couldn't have been the plan with Uncle Howdy, right?
I mean, I've said from jump, I praised Bray Wyatt's return, the production of it, the lead up to it with the White Rabbit. I thought all of that was really well done. But this is exactly what I knew was going to happen with Bray. They never stick the landing. It always gets muddled. It always goes awry. They never have like a clear-cut finish line for him. And it's all about it's all about the follow through, and they never follow through right with Bray. They never have.
Well, someone they have been following through with is Gunther. He's one of the longest reigning IC champions in the past decade or so. He wants to face Cody in Europe. So after their interactions in the Rumble, Gunther is looking forward to facing Cody. And they got to face off the first time when they were in the final 2 wrestlers in the Rumble. If you guys remember, obviously Rhodes eliminated Gunther to secure a spot, but this would be a huge potential event doing it somewhere overseas, maybe Germany. Like if they have a show somewhere, and I could just see it like, similar to SummerSlam 92 with Bulldog versus Brett. You could have Cody versus Gunther, like in a huge stadium, maybe in like somewhere where the German like Bundesliga plays.
I mean, Gunther and Cody tore it up in those last 7-8 minutes in the Rumble. I'm a huge fan of Gunther. I'm saying his correct name. I like Walter better. Talking about Lesnar and Bray, man, I want Lesnar and Gunther, man.
Hell yeah.
Like anybody Gunther matches up with, it gets me intrigued because I just love that guy. He's a top 5 performer right now for me.
And put the IC title on the line too. Why not? Like
Yeah.
Lesnar has never held that title.
Yep.
And it'd be if Lesnar takes the title, so be it. But have Gunther beat Lesnar at WrestleMania would be awesome.
Yeah. He's got to put that notch on his belt. A man to beat Lesnar, that's a big deal.
Vince McMahon's looking to put more shekels in his pocket, and he's hoping to receive more than market value for a sale of WWE. So this has been a story that's been on ice a little bit. Obviously, Endeavor, the group holdings, and the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund were definitely interested parties. But he's seeking as much as $9 billion from a sale, and the company is currently valued at $6.65 billion. We'll see if they can get this. But, I mean, if you go back to the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Saudi Arabia, they're valued at $620 billion, and they have stakes in companies like Amazon, Uber, Google, Nintendo, Facebook, Starbucks, Disney. They purchased, as we talked about, the English Professional Football Club, Newcastle United. They own Live Golf. They have enough money to do it. And I think even though we haven't heard the last of it, I think Endeavor is going to play a huge part going forward when Vince eventually pulls the trigger.
Yeah, I think I'd be shocked if Endeavor go after it. I know there's the allure of them owning both WWE and UFC and the type of like cross promotional stuff they could do with that, but they have a large ticketed debt from that
True.
UFC purchase. They paid over $4 billion for UFC, and they're going to have to borrow money to buy this over the value. They're valued at $6.65 billion. They're wanting $9 billion. If you look at Saudi offered to buy Formula One for $20 billion,
Right.
$20 billion. And I think the last time they sold it was around $3 or $4 billion. So they're willing to pay well over value. So I still think this Saudi shit has heat behind it. I see them being the ones to buy it. I honestly do.
We also have Rio potentially returning to AEW action probably as soon as next week. So Dave Meltzer reported that in the newsletter that she's due to come back, and Meltzer continued to speculate that Rio could be paired up against ROH Women's Champion Athena rather than being placed in the homegrown AEW wrestlers versus Toni Storm and Saraya Angle. So Rio's sorely missed. Can't wait to have her back. She's definitely a big part of the women's division.
Yeah, I always like Rio, and people forget that was the first champion in AEW.
Speaking of women wrestlers, The Rock's daughter in the latest WWE talent to undergo a name change. So Ava Raine was what she was formerly known as. She's now going to be known as Ava going forward, according to her NXT's WWE.com profile page. And as Tom says, the WWE.com profile page never lies. So
Yeah.
She has obviously a huge history and legacy behind her. She has a lot to live up to, but I think she has a lot in her favor as well. So now she's 21 years old. She's been training in Florida at the Performance Center. I think this is going to be huge you have the name. Like if Simone Johnson, Dwayne Johnson's daughter, Rock coming out with her is a story that writes itself.
Yeah, it's all on her shoulders. We know WWE loves that generational talent. It's just up to you to be be the Rock and not be like Curtis Axel.
Yeah.
You've got to make it's on you. And I think they'll get behind her. I mean, she's the daughter of one of the biggest stars the company's ever had. So it's up to her.
Tony Khan commented on Bryan Danielson potentially entering a G1 Climax tournament. So AEW president Tony Khan spoke on the In the Click podcast and asked if he had discussion with Danielson about taking part in New Japan's annual round robin. Khan said he would think it would be great in many ways, but Danielson is quite possible could be the AEW World Champion, which he probably won't be. Either way, I think it would be hard for him to disappear from the show, especially if he's champion. I'm not sure if he'll be able to get away from the show that much. Man, fantasy booking, I would love to see him spend a month or two over in Japan doing the G1 Climax. I think Danielson wants to do it too.
Yeah, I think Tony's not going to tip his cap to anything until after Revolution. I would love that. I mean, he's built for that. I do think we'll see him be in a G1 before he hangs it up. I really do.
Yeah, this played a huge part in his contract negotiation with WWE, and I think Vince actually gave him the go-ahead to work the G1, and Meltzer said, and I quote, "It's most likely Vince didn't have any idea what it was when he had that. He just gave him like the go-ahead. Go ahead and do it." Probably thought it was a race.
yeah, exactly. He had no idea that he'd have to
race
give
car
him
driver, damn it. Go ahead.
yeah, go drive one.
All right, AEW's Hangman Page talks about being detained at the border in Laredo, Texas. And he said, "I almost got detained at the border last night. I might have ended up in Mexico by accident. I still don't know, but I had to go through a border crossing check, and someone in the car who was not an American citizen didn't have their passport. I flew into San Antonio and then drove 2.5 hours to Laredo because Laredo would have been 3 flights, and that's just too many." And he said, "I don't know why. You tell me. You're from Laredo. You tell me why I went through a border crossing without crossing a border. I don't know, but we did." So Hangman was almost not on the show, and he played a huge part last week.
That's wild. Must have took a wrong turn.
It's like when you lived in New York. It's like when you go into New Jersey Transit by accident. Like, where are all these trains? Like, I'm supposed to be going towards Manhattan, not towards Trenton. All right.
yeah.
All right. So Jericho tweets about CM Punk, and this is definitely not in parallel to what he's been saying in the past. And he said, "I always loved working with CM Punk." When it looks like Matthew McMillan talked about them, the match they had at WrestleMania 28 for the WWE Championship. I don't know. Is this hinting towards Punk coming back? Is Jericho trying to scale back what he said in the first place?
The key in this little retweet from Jericho, they're talking about WrestleMania 28. The fans said it was a banger. Ocho and Punk, if by some miracle we see you guys in WWE anytime soon, would love to see y'all run this back. Jericho retweets it like you said and said, "I always loved working with @CM Punk." He tags CM Punk in it. But the key in this retweet to me is the ellipses at the end, the ... That to me says like he's playing with fans a little bit, because there were reports that came out that said he doesn't want Punk in the locker room. It's a cancer. I think those reports were disputed though. I don't think those were legit. Where there's smoke, there's fire, man. I truly feel like they're going to try and get Punk in here. I think the only thing that could be a roadblock to Punk coming back at this point is if it keeps Young Bucks and Omega from re-signing with the company. If that's a sticking point for those guys, I think maybe he doesn't come back. But if that's not a sticking point for keeping the elite in this company, I think we're seeing Punk back. I think if you follow everybody, all of these little comments, all of the stories Punk posts on his IG, it seems like there's something there to me.
And finally, for the quick hitters, Mercedes Moné discusses taking IWGP Women's Championship global. And this is something that's very important to her. And she said, and I quote, "I'm on my world tour. And after tomorrow night, when I successfully beat Kyrie to become the IWGP Women's Champion, I plan to take that title absolutely everywhere. I plan to make this global and join any company that has the right bag." So AEW seems like it's on the horizon.
Yeah, and she also, I don't have the quote here, but there was also a quote she released that one of the people she is a dream opponent that she wants to work with is Mickie James in Impact Wrestling.
Cool.
So I think she could work anywhere.
So let's go through the results quick. Dynamite on 215, we had Mox and Claudio defeating Roosh and Preston Vance in a Texas Tornado match. Mark Briscoe was back on Dynamite defeating Josh Woods. House of Black TV glitch we saw in that little program thing with the Young Bucks doing the basketball stuff.
This is what we want.
And Christian returned. So Christian back with Jungle Boy. Christian was sorely missed, in my opinion.
Yeah, good to see Christian back. Such a bitch move, pulling out the mace on Jungle Boy. I loved it. Such a good heel move.
So on Rampage from the 17th, the Elite defeated Top Flight and AR Fox to retain the trios titles. We had House of Black entering. Dustin Rhodes defeated Swerve, a rare DQ. I think this was the third DQ by my research in AEW history, so big deal here. Keith Lee returned. looking like Carl Winslow returning to attack Swerve.
I know, man. He's all grayed out.
And Ricky Starks defeated Daniel Garcia.
This was a really good Rampage episode. People are sleeping on Rampage because it has this stigma, but it was a really good episode when the lights kicked on the trios match at the end and House of Black standing up there. I believe it was just Brody, King, and Malachi.
Yep.
I popped, man. I love this slow burn. As long as you're giving me that story, I'm here for it.
On the WWE side of things, on the 13th, on Monday, Lashley and Lesnar contract signing. Just quick shout out to Visits the Tavern. Joey Conway was one of the security guards that got beat up by Lesnar, and Joel Maximo from SAT. So shout out to those guys. They're in Brooklyn. Sammy and Rhodes had that promo, aka Finish Your Story, which great promo, emotionally driven. And then Bianca defeated Becky and Bayley, and they would not be in the chamber going forward to get a shot at Bianca at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
On SmackDown, Montreal on the 17th, Gunther defeated Madcap to retain the IC title, and Sammy got a huge reaction we saw the debut of the "Fuck You Roman" chants in Montreal. We heard them at San Antonio, but Montreal did a little bit louder.
Yeah.
For the Elimination Chamber, the U.S. Championship was defended. Austin Theory got the win based on Logan Paul's interference, and Seth Rollins lost. Asuka went on to win the Women's Chamber to face Bianca at WrestleMania. Roman defeated Sammy to retain after a mess, and then Lashley defeated Lesnar via DQ. So not a great night of wrestling, but great storytelling to advance WrestleMania, and they definitely have some things set in place.
Yeah, I'm stoked for Asuka Bianca. I think that's good.
For GCW, Jimmy Lloyd's birthday, all grown up, was partnered with VXS on the 17th, was happening at the same time as SmackDown. Most notably main evented by a no ropes barbed wire match. Jimmy Lloyd defeated Effie, and Mike Bailey also had a great match with Miedo Extremo.
Yeah, East West Express, Jordan Oliver and Nick Wayne. Love that tag team. They beat Strange by Command. It was cool. Commander, shout out.
Love Commander. Middle of the night, 2:18, which was last night, happened right after. Well, we're taping right now on Sunday morning, but middle of the night, some notable matches. Nick Wayne defeated Matt Cardona in his Extra Cooler tights, by the way. Great fucking tights by Nick from Extra Cooler.
Shout out to Extra Cooler.
Leo Rush defeated Commander, and the GCW World Championship, Nick Gage defeated Mike Bailey. Much to my chagrin, I wanted Bailey to win the GCW title.
Yeah, I'm wanting that GCW World Championship to get a little better. That situation right now, it's not hitting for me.
All right, so for Impact on the 16th, Kushida defeated Chris Bay. Barry Horowitz debuted on Impact, defeating Johnny Swinger with the help of WCW's Kiss Demon. And Rich Swann defeated Kenny King. What is going on Impact?
I am popping so huge with the Johnny Swinger. Like, I love that this is how you tap into wrestling history with what you can get. I mean, you're giving me WCW Kiss Demon and Barry Horowitz. I'm there.
For Battle in the Valley on the 18th, most notably, there's a lot that happened here, but the three matches everyone was circling was the loser leaves New Japan Pro Wrestling. Eddie Kingston said goodnight to Jay White. Women's Championship was defended by Kairi, and Mercedes Moné came out on top, and Okada defeated Tanahashi to retain the World Heavyweight Championship. And the match for Battle in the Valley between the Women's Championship and the person reviewing that's on Wrestling Observer, and I agree with this, and said, and I quote, "A match that earned its position in the card. These two were treated like legitimate superstars with the crowd alive for this one. With the pre-match video package, this was hard-hitting and vicious from the jump, and they never lost the crowd in this 25-minute battle. An excellent match and an excellent start to Mercedes' post-WWE career. Highly recommend." So go out and check that match out.
Yeah, I cannot wait to see what comes next with Mercedes.
For NWA
and Jay
Power.
White. And Jay White.
For sure, yeah. NWA Power on the 14th, Valentine's Day. If you had no one to hang out with, you're watching some Power. Thomas Latimer defeated Jordan Clearwater to win the NWA TV Championship. La Rebellion defeated the Mortons, and Tyrus defended his NWA World Heavyweight Championship successfully against Rolando Freeman with the Spectaculars in his corner.
Good show. Man, they got to do something with Tyrus, man. They just have to do something with Tyrus in that title.
For MLW, on Underground on the 16th, Calvin Tankman defeated Willie Mack. The women's featherweight champion Tyler Valkyrie defeated Zoe Scott to retain, and Real One defeated Mance Warner in a street fight, which was a really good match.
Yeah, Real One, for those that don't know, Enzo Amore. Was fun. It was a very fun match. I love Mance Warner.
All right, let's get into Dave's raves and see what Dave has to say.
Let's do it.
All right, so Dave's Raves, his match of the week was Okada versus Shingo Takagi from February 11th in Osaka, 4 3/4 stars. Great match. Okada on a nice little run here. He's about to go have that Noah show. We'll talk about in the week ahead. But he's on a little bit of a run playing a heel in Noah, and he has a little edge to him.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm digging it. I like the partnership here with Okada kind of going over to Noah. The angle they shot that we played the clip on a couple episodes ago in Wrestling Tonight. Like, I think this has been well done.
Yeah, he's doing his best to put over Kato Kiyomiya as like that new face of Noah, because obviously with Muto leaving, it's like they need somebody else to take the helm and be a future star. So a big deal.
Yeah.
His performer of the week is Shingo Takagi. And why not? The match was great. Could have been Okada or Takagi, but both those guys went out there and ripped.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff in the notes too, I'm not going to read all this in here, but he does talk about the original plan for WrestleMania and talks about what he thinks he would do, why he would do the belt change, and talking about the difference between now and Daniel Bryan and how this is a big moment in time for Triple H to separate himself from Vince McMahon's ideology. And the biggest piece here is, if you're looking at it, this was written before the Elimination Chamber happened. So this is all sort of without that hindsight ability to apply to it. So very, very interesting read. I sent it to those that wanted to see it, but about 4 or 5 paragraphs in talking about why Zayn doesn't fit the mentality of a star, but you kind of have to pull the trigger. Awesome stuff.
Here's the thing with that Zayn doesn't fit the mentality of the star. I hate that. You can make anyone a star. You know what I mean? Like, you
Right.
don't, I get that he doesn't fit the mold that WWE has had, but you can, if you put that machine behind him. I think of the Steve Jobs quote: people don't know what they want until you show it to them.
Right.
It's up to you to show it to us. Don't go by, oh, this is the way it's done. Show it to us. And I think Dave is right. You know, there is an opportune time for Triple H to separate himself from the way Vince McMahon does things. And I think this is one of those situations.
As Hawk would say, impress me. Let's get to the week ahead.
Yeah, let's get to the week ahead.
All right, we got some good stuff on the week ahead, starting with tonight on Monday Night Raw, the Chamber fallout, everything going on with that. I'm sure they're going to set more things in motion. Maybe we'll see Logan Paul, but we have an official match that was at the Scrum. Edge will be taking on Theory for the U.S. title. Who knows what happens? I don't think Theory has a clear path, but obviously Edge and Finn Balor are destined to wrestle at WrestleMania, so maybe we'll figure out who Theory is wrestling. Maybe it's John Cena.
Yeah, and I think the key thing with Raw and SmackDown, Elimination Chamber's over. I think we're really going to start seeing Cody and Roman heat up here.
For MLW Underground 221 at 10 p.m., MLW champion Alex Hammerstone defends his championship against Yamato, and the Billeting Bulldogs will be in action. So some good stuff. You're looking for some action late at night. Check out MLW on Reels.
Hammerstone's crushing it, man. I love Hammerstone. I think the guy's a star. If he goes to one of the major companies, he could be a big time guy.
As we mentioned, Pro Wrestling Noah will be having Pro Wrestling's Last Love, which will be Keiji Muto's last match, not as the Great Muto, but as Keiji Muto on 2/21/23. Keiji Muto from Noah will be taking on Naito from New Japan Pro Wrestling. Just note, Muto's working with a torn quad that he suffered in one of the matches going forward, so he's going to really suffering through that. But the other match, dude, Okada versus Kato Kiyomiya. This was the work shoot that we showed on here. Who knows who's going to win? You have 2 world champions going against each other, but obviously you want to do a clean finish. It's potentially a best of 3 set, so I'd imagine that someone's going to get their win back, but I see Kiyomiya getting the win here.
Yeah, it's going to be, I love the way they built this. So it's going to be well worth the watch. Noah crushes it, man. Shout out to Ninja Mac. He's over there tearing it up.
On AEW Dynamite on 222, we have some matches announced, only one official, Mox versus Evil Uno. Tony Khan's to make an important announcement, and the Lucha Brothers are returning to action. Not sure who they're wrestling, but it'll be nice to see them back.
Yeah, I'm happy to see those guys back. I'm really intrigued to see what Tony Khan has to say.
AEW Rampage from 224, officially Action Andretti versus Sammy Guevara. I'm sure we'll get some more matches on Dynamite that will tell us what's happening, but for right now, Action Andretti and Guevara seem like they're main eventing.
Should be fun. I like Andretti. He's a hot young talent.
On Impact on 223, we have a Beat the Clock challenge. Tommy Dreamer versus Bully Ray. Gresham and Bailey will be teaming up to take on the Motor City Machine Guns. Allison Kay versus Taya Valkyrie. Diener and Callahan versus Kazarian and Yuri Yamira. And main eventing a Monsters Ball X Division Championship. Trey Miguel versus Crazy Steve. I haven't seen the Monsters Ball in a while, but this is a staple match in Impact.
Yeah, big staple match. And, Trey Miguel, I love the edge he's been bringing lately, but that Jonathan Gresham, Mike Bailey versus Motor City Machine Guns, that has my eyes for sure.
No Surrender happening on 2/24/23. This is their pay-per-view. So go out and buy it, support them. Main evented by the Impact World Championship, Josh Alexander defending against Rich Swann. The Knockout Champion, Mickie James, defending against Masa Slamovich. The Tag Team Championship for the women, the Death Dolls defending against Hex. The Digital Media Championship, Joe Hendry, that I know you love, defending against Moose in a dot combat match. PCO versus Brian Myers versus Eddie Edwards versus Steve Macklin in a number one contenders fatal four-way. A lot of good stuff on this card. And on the pre-show, Speedball Mike Bailey versus John Gresham. So they're stacked.
Dude, their roster's great. And I think they have something in Joe Hendry, man. I really do. I know he's got that Digital Media Championship. You could have him hold that world title in the future. I think that's the type of, you have a star in Joe Hendry with the music angle, his entrance theme. I love what they're doing with him. And, Mickie James against Masha Slamovich. Come on. And Josh Alexander's crushing it. So it'll be fun to watch him with Rich Swann.
Well, that's all we got, man. Any shilling for the tavern to lead up to the week? I know we got some big stuff going on. I know you guys got the flagship, obviously, on Thursday morning, but anything else you want to get out there?
No, nothing in particular. We got, flagship Thursday. Raw Down will be very interesting. I want to hear their takes on what happened with the Elimination Chamber. That's Thursdays at 8 p.m. Shot of Nostalgia rolls on episode 4?
Episode 4. 3 Raws
Friday.
For you guys.
Yeah, Friday at 7 p.m. Always a great show. Most of these are always available the day after on our Apple and Spotify too. So if you want to check out anything we do, Fig Night, I think, is returning this week, Tuesdays at 7. If you want to follow anything we do, the 3 main hubs, go to Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Give us a follow. Give us a review. We appreciate any support. And you can find all of those links at theturnbuckletavern.com.
Just doing some shilling for myself. Remarkable Wrestling, Better Than the Best 2 is going to be this Friday. So if you guys are in the Long Island area or Deer Park, anywhere, come out and see Steel Cage Warzone 5-on-5. It's going to be amazing. Also, a 30-man over-the-top rope battle royal winner gets a shot at Gabriel Sky's Remarkable Heavyweight Championship. And also crowning the first ever women's champion. I'll be ring announcing. Come see me. I have these trading cards. Come see me. I'll sign one for you. All good stuff. Come see live wrestling. Get out of the cold and come see live wrestling.
Yeah, appreciate you guys always supporting the tavern, and love hearing the support for Wrestling Tonight. We enjoy coming on here and kicking your week off with some news, getting you up to date on everything all over the pro wrestling world. It's always a fun time, man.
Absolutely, man. And this has been a blast, but I mean, I'll let you lead us out. Tell us how we should always keep it.
You got to keep it snug and stiff, guys. Until next week, we'll see you then.
Reach for the sky, boy.